It's Thursday, August 4th, 2005, off the rugged edge of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, a remote stretch of the Far East, where the Pacific sprawls cold and endless. The sea lies flat, its surface a dull, steely gray, beneath a sky so low and heavy it seems to press down on the water, holding everything still. At precisely 11:48 a.m., a small submarine cuts through the waves and vanishes below, slipping into the depths with the quiet hum of machinery. This is the AS-28 Prise, a modest vessel just 13 meters long, its steel hull scarred and weathered from nearly 2 decades in the Russian Navy. Inside, 7 men ride along, seasoned officers, each carrying a story etched into their bones. At the helm stands Vyacheslav Milachevsky, the commander, a man with a stern gaze and a face lined by years of facing the unforgiving sea. The air inside the Prise hangs cold and thick, saturated with the sharp tang of metal and the faint greasy scent of old oil. The walls bristle with a chaotic jumble of buttons, levers, and flickering gauges, their faint glow casting long shadows in the cramped space. Milachevsky adjusts his headset with deliberate, steady hands roughened by a lifetime of service, marked by calluses that tell of countless missions. Nearby, Anatoly Popov, the navigator, pores over a faded sea chart, his graying hair catching the dim light as he traces their path with a weathered finger. He's a big man, solid as the steel around them, his presence a quiet anchor for the crew. Their mission feels almost ordinary, a routine dip into the deep. They're headed 190 meters down to tend to a secretive piece of Cold War tech, a hydrophone array, a network of steel tubes stretching 100 meters long, studded with sensors designed to catch the slightest ripple, the faintest hint of an enemy sub lurking near Russia's shores. On paper, it's a relic needing maintenance. Beneath the surface, it's still a silent spy, watching a war that never fully faded. The mood aboard carries a rare lightness, a fleeting break from their usual grind. Milachevsky slips a crumpled photo from his pocket, one he keeps close at all times. It shows 2 little girls, twins 5 years old, Sasha and Nastya, their bright eyes and wide smiles a stark contrast to the gloom around him. He lingers on their faces, a flicker of warmth softening his hard edges, as he imagines their laughter waiting for him back home. Valery Lepetuka, the first-rank captain, sits nearby, a tall figure with sharp, piercing eyes that seem to cut through the shadows. His presence is steady, unshakable, a rock amid the crew's ebb and flow. In the back, Alexander Ivanov, a master chief, toys with an old transistor radio, his nimble fingers prying it apart with a worn screwdriver, a restless habit to pass the time. These men are more than a team. They're a family, forged by years of shared hardship, sleepless nights in frigid bases, missions through storms that roared like the end of the world, and the lingering ache of darker days. 5 years earlier, in August 2000, they'd stood powerless as the Kursk, a nuclear sub, sank in the Barents Sea, taking 118 sailors with it. That loss still haunts them, a wound that never fully heals. But today, inside this creaky press, those memories feel distant, pushed aside by the hum of the present. The descent begins, and the sub drops deeper, meter by meter, into a silence that grows thicker with every passing second. At 50 meters, the daylight fades, swallowed by a bluish dark that presses against the hull. At 100 meters, the cold seeps in, a slow, creeping chill that claws through the steel and settles into their bones. By 150 meters, The ocean's weight bears down, squeezing the sub until it groans and creaks, the sounds echoing like distant thunder in the tight space. Anatoly's eyes stay locked on his gauges, his calm demeanor masking the faint tension rippling beneath. Everyone knows this vessel's seen better days. Navy budgets have shrunk, repairs have been skipped, worn parts left to rust. It's a gamble they accept without a word, a quiet pride stitched into their resolve. At 190 meters, they reach their mark. The prize's lights slice through the blackness, illuminating a massive shape. The hydrophone. It looms like a steel titan in this liquid night, its cables sprawling outward like dark tendrils vanishing into the gloom. Milachevsky eases the controls with a careful hand, guiding the sub closer, every move precise, deliberate. The crew watches the screens, breaths held tight, the faint hum of the engines filling the stillness. Everything seems on track, the mission unfolding as planned. But out there, beyond the reach of their lights, something waits, an unseen danger, coiled in the shadows, ready to turn this routine dive into a fight for survival. What happens when the deep decides to hold on tight? That twist is coming, and it's about to change everything. At 1 p.m., the calm shatters. A sudden jolt slams through the prise, a harsh thud reverberating against the hull like a fist pounding steel. The sub lurches, tilting just enough to throw a ripple of unease through the crew. Alexander Eben, the other master chief, snaps upright, his wide eyes darting through the dark, searching for a sign of what hit them. Milachevsky's hands tighten on the controls, his gaze burning into the screens, but they show nothing, just an endless void of black. Then a low, menacing rumble rolls from the rear, and the propeller grinds to a halt, as if something's strangling it. Anatoly dives into his instruments, fingers racing over the dials, his breath quickening as the truth sinks in. The sub's lost all power to move. Milachevsky wrestles with the controls, urging the engine to life, but it only coughs a dying groan before falling silent again. Valery Lepetuka's stare fixes on the sonar, his shadowed face hardening as the reality dawns. They're stuck, pinned in place with no way out. Out in the freezing abyss, the Pris is ensnared. It's not some forgotten fishing net that's caught them. It's a thick steel cable, part of the hydrophone's anchor system, tethered to a 60-ton weight built to withstand the fiercest currents. Tangled nets add to the trap, wrapping around the prop like a spider's web, locking the sub tight at 190 meters down. This is a depth where light never reaches, where the ocean's pressure presses in with a force that could crumple steel like paper. The sub sits helpless, chained to the deep, its hull creaking under the strain. A heavy stillness settles over the crew, the kind that presses on the chest and makes every breath feel deliberate. Milachevsky turns to face his men, their eyes meeting his in a silent plea for direction. He steadies himself, swallowing the dread rising in his throat, and takes charge. The situation's clear. At this depth, escape's impossible without help from above. Anatoly's hands move fast, sending out an SOS through the radio, his fingers trembling despite his focus. The message crackles into the void. AS-28, trapped 190 meters down in Berezovaya Bay, prop dead, urgent help needed. Seconds stretch into an eternity, the crew's nerves fraying with each tick until a faint, scratchy reply filters back. Rescue's being organized. They just need to hold on. But down here, in this steel coffin, holding on feels like a cruel tease when every second chips away at their air. Milachevsky wipes a tired hand across his face, his mind already racing through their resources. The crew counts what's left. 7 oxygen tanks line the wall, enough for about 72 hours if they breathe steady. 3 days, maybe, if panic doesn't take over. Gennady Balonin, the engineer who helped design the Prise, slumps slightly, his shoulders heavy with unspoken guilt. He knows this sub's flaws, years of skipped maintenance, budget cuts that left it limping along, but there's no time for regrets now, only survival. Water's rationed immediately, a single bottle passed around with strict precision. 3 sips per man per day, no exceptions. Alexander Ivanov's cracked lips brush the rim as he takes his share, his hand shaking slightly from the cold. Food sits untouched, a few dry biscuits in a rusty tin, too costly in oxygen to eat just yet. Valeri's discipline holds firm, his gaze lingering on the tin before turning away, saving it for when desperation demands it. The temperature plunges to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, a biting chill that creeps into their bones, numbing fingers and stiffening joints. They pull on threadbare jackets, but the damp cold clings like a second skin, inescapable. The lights dim to a flicker, preserving the batteries, casting the sub into a haunting half-dark where shadows twist and stretch across the walls. Milachevsky sinks onto a bench, staring into the void, his thoughts spinning. 72 hours, that's the lifeline they're clinging to. 3 days for rescue to find them. But how long will it take? The hull groans again, a reminder of the ocean's unrelenting grip, and doubt creeps in despite his resolve. Up above, plans might be forming, help might be on the way, but down here in this frozen, lightless trap, they're alone, utterly alone, with only the cold, the dark, and a ticking clock for company. The deep's got them now, and it's not letting go easy. What happens next will test everything they've got. Friday, August 5th, midnight. 12 hours into their ordeal, and the Prise feels like a different world. The air's no longer just cold and sharp. It's dense, heavy, like trying to breathe through a thick fog. A faint, sour sting hangs in it now, a silent killer building up. Carbon dioxide, seeping out with every exhale from the 7 men trapped inside. Milachevsky rubs his temples, a dull throb pulsing behind his eyes, the first sign of the poison working its way in. He closes his eyes for a moment, and his twins' faces swim up. Sasha and Nastya, their voices echoing in his head from 2 days ago, full of trust that he'd be back soon. His jaw clenches, and he forces his eyes open, determination stealing his spine. Giving up isn't an option, not for them, not for him. Anatoly's hands move to the oxygen tanks, his fingers slow and deliberate as he switches to the second cylinder. The first one's nearly spent, its hiss fading to nothing. A rush of fresh air spills out, cutting through the staleness for a fleeting second, and the crew breathes it in, a brief reprieve that's gone too fast. They know it's a countdown. Each tank burned through brings them closer to the end. Alexander Ivanov slumps against the wall, his usual spark dimmed, his body conserving what little energy it has left. The cold bites deeper now, sinking into their marrow, their breath fogging in faint clouds that vanish in the gloom. Up above, Russia's stirring to life, grappling with the crisis unfolding in its waters. At a rundown naval base in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, officers scramble through dim corridors, their faces taut with urgency. In Moscow, Defense Minister Sergei Ivanov gets yanked from his office by a late-night call, the news hitting hard. A rescue sub of all things, stuck 190 meters down, 7 lives hanging by a thread. The ghost of the Kursk looms large. 5 years back, August 2000, 118 sailors lost when Pride delayed outside help too long. This time, they move faster. By 10 p.m., Thursday, less than 10 hours in, Moscow's reaching out, Japan's sending 4 ships, the U.S. is rallying gear from San Diego, and in Glasgow, Scotland, a team's loading up the Scorpio 45, a robot sub built to cut through cables at 1,000 meters deep. In a chilly Glasgow hangar, Stuart Goldard paces beside the Scorpio, his gray hair a mess, his hands twitchy with adrenaline. He's a man marked by the past, there for the Kursk, helpless as it slipped away. That failure drives him now, a fire burning under his tired exterior as he pushes his crew to move fast. The Scorpio's their ace, its steel arms ready to slice through anything, but it's a 5,000-mile haul to Kamchatka, and time's bleeding out with every passing hour. Saturday, August 6th, 7 a.m., 43 hours down. The third tank's running and the air's turning hostile, thick with CO2 that stings the lungs. The men sprawl across benches or lean against the icy walls, their movements sluggish, every ounce of strength saved for breathing. Milachevsky's eyes roam the crew, his mind barking orders to stay calm, keep steady. The cold's a beast now, clawing at their fingers till they're numb, cracking their lips raw. Valery stares at the biscuit tin, hunger gnawing at him, but he turns away. Eating's a luxury they can't afford yet. Gennady Balonin's shoulders sag, his mind replaying years of ignored warnings about the prince's state. Guilt gnawing at him like the cold gnaws at their bodies. By noon, whispers of the crisis leak out. In Vladivostok, a reporter named Gusel Latipova gets a frantic call. A woman's voice, choked with tears, spilling the story of 7 men trapped. A cover-up in the works. Gusel digs, hits a wall with the Navy, but the truth slips free anyway. Soon, TV screens worldwide light up with the news. In a small house near Petropavlovsk, Olga Milachevsky watches. Her twins nestle close, their innocent questions tugging at her heart as she fights back tears, clinging to hope she can't be sure of. Inside the press, dizziness creeps in. Milachevsky pulls a scrap of paper from his pocket, his numb fingers fumbling with a pencil. He starts a note, words to Olga, Sasha, Nastya, a love letter in case the worst comes. But he stops, crumples it, shoving the thought away. Not yet. The oxygen's dwindling, the clock's ticking louder. Rescue's out there, moving closer. But will it beat the deep's tightening grip? That answer's rushing in, and it's a do-or-die moment. Sunday, August 7th, 7 a.m., 68 hours underwater. At Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky's airstrip, a British cargo plane roars in, its engines battling the icy wind slicing across the tarmac. Inside sits the Scorpio 45, a robot sub with steel arms, the best shot at pulling those 7 men out alive. Stuart Goldard steps off, his face etched with exhaustion, eyes darting over the scene, but chaos erupts fast. There's no crane to unload the Scorpio's 2-ton frame. The Russians fumble, caught off guard. They're scrambling, doing nothing to hide the screw-up. Goldard's fists clench, frustration boiling under his skin as precious minutes slip away. Everyone a breath stolen from the crew below. By 8:30, a U.S. plane lands from San Diego, a mobile crane in tow. Crews swarm it, yanking the Scorpio free in a frantic rush, its metal gleaming under the flat gray sky. But an hour and a half's gone, a brutal delay. Goldard's mind churns, calculating what's left. If they've got 72 hours, maybe 4 remain. Ian Rich, his lean, no-nonsense boss, shakes his head, the math bleaker than that. Time's a razor's edge now, and they're racing it flat out. Down in the Priz, the third tank's dead. Milachevsky's shaky hands crack the fourth, the valve fighting him as oxygen hisses out. Weak and faltering, he figures 24 hours at most, his gaze sweeping over his crew, shivering wrecks, drenched in cold sweat, their faces pale as death in the dim flicker. Alexander Eben's chest heaves, each breath a ragged gasp, pain twisting his features as the CO2 burns deeper. Milachevsky steadies himself beside him, willing strength into the man, clinging to the hope that helps near, but doubts a growing shadow, clawing at his resolve with every passing second. At 10 a.m., the Scorpio reaches the docks after a brutal ride. The road's a wreck, potholes cratering the path, forcing the trucks to crawl to protect the robot. What should have been 45 minutes drags into a full hour, every bump a test of Goldard's fraying nerves. He rides up front, staring at the sea, his fingers tapping a restless beat on his knee, his mind locked on that shrinking window. By 11 a.m., the Scorpio's hoisted onto a weathered Russian ship, its hull patched and peeling. At 1 p.m., it drops into the bay's dark waters, sinking fast toward the trap sub. Goldard hunches over the controls in a sweaty, cramped room, eyes glued to a screen showing nothing but black. He tweaks the lights, cursing the murk until the prize's shape looms into view, a steel prisoner tangled in cables and nets. The Scorpio's claws whir to life, every move a high-stakes gamble in the blind depths. Inside the prize, 3 p.m. A dull thud echoes against the hull, a jolt that snaps Milachevsky's head up. Another follows, sharper, rattling the steel. He drags himself to the periscope, legs weak, and peers out. A mechanical shadow glides past, its shape precise, purposeful, a lifeline cutting through the dark. Relief flickers in his chest, a fragile spark lighting his worn face. The crew stirs, their sunken eyes catching that same glimmer, a whisper of hope breaking through the haze. But the air's a toxic stew now, the fifth tank fading fast, every breath a fight against the inevitable. Up top, Goldard's drenched in sweat, wrestling the Scorpio through its work. The main cable, thick as a man's arm, resists, taunting him, until the claws finally slice it clean, the snap ringing in his ears. Then the nets, stubborn and snarled, fall one by one under the robot's relentless grip. Each cuts an eternity, each second a battle against the clock. By 4 p.m., only a handful remain, the prize trembling with every slice. Down below, time's unraveling, the crew's gas growing shallower, their bodies buckling under the strain. Rescue's so close, right there, but the deep's not done fighting. Can they hold out just a little longer? The end's barreling in, and it's all or nothing. Sunday, August 7th, 4:10 p.m. 76 hours underwater. Inside the prize, the air's a death trap, thick with poison that claws at their lungs. Milachevsky's vision blurs, shadows dancing in front of him, tricks of a mind starved for oxygen. Alexander Iben slumps lifeless on a bench, his chest barely rising, a faint wheeze the only sign he's still in the fight. Anatoly fumbles with the sixth tank, his hands shaking as it sputters to life, the hiss weak and dying fast. 12 hours left, maybe less. Time's a thread fraying to nothing. Milachevsky braces himself, his gaze sweeping the crew, willing them to hang on, his own strength fading under the weight of it all. Up top, Stuart Goldard's locked in, piloting the Scorpio with a desperate edge. The control room's a pressure cooker, air heavy with sweat and strain. He's severed the main cable, that steel beast pinning the Priz down, and now he's carving through the nets. those tangled ropes clinging like a last stand. One by one they snap, the Scorpio's claws slicing with surgical grit. At 4:25, just one remains, a final barrier between the crew and freedom. Goldard's hands tremble, slick with sweat, as he zeroes in. The claw bites down, a sharp crack echoes through, and the prize jolts free, rising slow, its buoyancy pulling it up at last. Ian Rich's voice cuts through from the deck, a raw shout of triumph as the sub breaks loose. Inside, Milachevsky feels the floor shift, a hum vibrating through the steel. Gennady's eyes widen, his breath catching as the sub lurches upward, a groan of metal signaling release. The crew freezes, disbelief warring with hope as the prize climbs, inching toward the surface. Alexander Ivanov stirs, his hazy gaze flickering with a spark of life, sensing the shift. Milachevsky grips the console, his heart pounding, every creak a promise he's too scared to trust. On the Russian ship, the crew crowds the deck, eyes locked on the waves, tension coiling tight in their chests. At 4:30 p.m., a shape breaches the dark water, a steel hull rising like a ghost from the abyss. The prize surfaces, whole and real, and a wild roar tears through the bay, relief exploding across the ship. The hatches groan open, cold air rushing in, sharp and clean against the toxic stew inside. Milachevsky staggers out, legs buckling under him, Valeri steadying his fall. One by one, the 7 men emerge, faces gaunt, hands trembling, bodies battered by 76 hours of hell, but alive, breathing pulled back from the edge. Milachevsky sinks to his knees on the deck, tears streaking his face, a flood of exhaustion and gratitude washing over him. Anatoly drops beside him, their shoulders touching, a silent bond forged in survival. Alexander Ivan, hoisted by sailors, blinks into the light, a faint grin cracking his hollow face. 5,000 miles away in Glasgow, Stuart Goldard slumps in a hangar chair, his body spent, a tired smile breaking through the strain. Ian Rich stands nearby, eyes glinting with quiet pride. In Petropavlovsk, Olga Milachevsky clutches her twins, Sasha and Nastya, tears soaking their hair as word comes that a chopper's bringing her husband home, safe at last. 76 hours underwater, 7 lives snatched back. Russia, the UK, the US, Japan, an unlikely crew defied the deep, beating its icy hold with raw grit and a bond that stretched across the globe. That day the ocean came close, its grip tightening till the last second. But humanity pushed back, clawing out a miracle from the jaws of fate. So next time the world feels heavy, the day drags you down, think of them. 7 guys, 190 meters under, and a wind that proves sometimes, against all odds, life fights through. Take a deep breath, look up, and hold on to that.